Hi, this is Merrick, VP of Sales over at Map My Customers. Thank you for joining us on our weekly video blog, The Roadmap. This is episode 6, which we're calling the psychology behind selection biases. This idea came from our last episode, episode 5 on the Challenger sale. I briefly mentioned selection biases. We had a couple of questions about them in sort of our dialogue afterwards, where people wanted to sort of learn a little bit more about sort of what I meant by that and sort of why it's applicable. So we wanted to dig in around that specifically and really in detail around primacy bias and recency bias. So first, what is primacy bias and what is recency bias? It is a psychology term that actually is related to how people make decisions, right? So the primacy bias is the psychology term for the decision-making process, where the first item presented to you, there's a natural bias towards it because your mind is using it as the natural measuring stick for all the other alternatives, right? If you go and you look at a whole bunch of different houses, say 4 different houses, you naturally will want to say, oh, but house number 1 had this and this one doesn't have that, because it is setting the framework for the decision-making process throughout. Recency bias, on the other hand, is the fact that whatever is shown to you most recently has a stronger hold within your memory, so you're referring to it in a stronger fashion, right? So if you go and look at these same set of houses, you're like, yeah, but the last house that we saw, it just had a really big backyard. And it's because it's freshest in your mind and it has a larger sort of push and pull over that decision-making process. And these are two of the largest biases that actually impact decision making, right? So how do these selection biases actually manifest themselves in your decision making processes, right? So let's do an example. You're buying a car, you're looking at a Jeep, you're looking at a Honda, and you're looking at a Lexus. In this scenario, we're going to go and look at the Jeep first. By looking at the Jeep first, the primacy bias is going to say that whatever the Jeep buying criteria that they sell us on are going to be some of the biggest buying criteria that influences our entire purchasing making decision. So for us, this may be things like, oh, the Jeep is so rugged, or the Jeep is so customizable, or it's so adventurous. And then when we go and we look at things like Honda and Lexus, our thought process is going to be, well, it's just not as adventurous or fun as the Jeep is. And it's because the way that we are thinking about this purchase has now been influenced by that initial primacy bias. In converse, you also have the recency bias, which says that whatever you look at last is the freshest thing in your memory. So if we looked at the Lexus last, especially if we looked at a lot of options like 10 cars instead of 3, you're going to just say, well, the Lexus was finely tuned and the details were nice and it was well put together, and it just really felt like a well put together car, right? And it's because it's freshest in our mind and it's right there. So you can do the same thing in the market. If you think about a company like Apple, what Apple did is they said, well, it's not a computer, it's a Mac. Right, all focusing on the simplicity, the ease of use, all these emotions, and not just raw, what is the element. Another example would be someone like Chobani Yogurt that came out and said, oh, it's natural, it's Chobani. A lot of yogurts were natural, a lot of yogurts were even Greek yogurt, but Chobani took a hold of that marketplace and grew an empire around all natural Greek yogurt, entirely based off of differentiating themselves from what the other yogurt companies were doing, which was just flavor. Thanks for tuning in for episode 6 of The Roadmap. My name is Merrick, VP of Sales over here at Map My Customers. And as always, we're trying to start a dialogue with this. We want your questions, we want your comments, we want your concerns. We really want to dig in around these topics and create that sort of back and forth dialogue with you guys. So see you guys next week.